Blizzard's going to nerf warriors in a way that makes them less fun to play, not just that changes them statistically. I don't think that putting in rage normalization is going to be done well. I think it's going to be done very poorly. We're going to end up having experiences like at the start of Wrath of the Lich King and TBC, where in Wrath, for example, the highest DPS warriors in the first phase did 33% less damage than the highest DPS Death Knights. That's a fucking problem because the Death Knights also brought more utility. What the hell, Blizzard? And in TBC, we had just as equally of ridiculous things. And I think they're going to try to bring that to Season of Discovery. And it's not just bad because it's going to potentially shift the meta in a big way, but it's also bad because it makes the game less fun for the Warriors beyond the meta implications. Let's assume for a moment that they could find a way where they make it so that the meta isn't impacted at all. Warriors do the exact same amount of damage, but they get to hit less buttons. And by get to hit less buttons, I mean it just says on your screen, you do not have enough rage. You do not have enough rage. You do not have enough rage over and over and over again. But nothing else changes. So maybe your moves hit a little harder, but you generate less rage. Everything else the same, that would be less fun. It would feel like you have less agency as a player. This is what is going to happen with rage normalization, because it's going to be done in some silly ham-fisted doofus way, because that is the way that Blizzard likes to do literally everything. It's like they do not play the game, and they basically do not play the game because the people who work for them that say they play the game play it extremely casually, generally. They will be like, I do play the game. It took me 4 weeks to get to max level. Like, does not really count, brother. It just does not. How would I think they should go about balancing the game? Maybe why should you care about it? What kind of features would you like to see from the balance? These are the things that I think matter the most, and I think you'd agree. Maybe top-end warriors should do less damage, but the changes that make them do less damage should make them enjoy the gameplay more. Okay, what else? Low-end players should do more damage. Low-end warriors, that is. And low-end warriors should enjoy the gameplay more while doing more damage. And then finally, maybe the most important thing, the meta should not be drastically changed. Or at least, if it is changed, it should not cause other classes to be displaced from the game. It would be bad if what we did was we made top-end warriors do 10% less damage, we made bottom-end warriors do 50% more damage, the highest Warcraft logs appear more balanced, and then in pug groups, if you're not playing a warrior DPS, nobody would let you into a raid. That would be bad for the game, right? Even though warriors might like it. So we want an increase in the probability of a pug raid leader taking a warrior to occur because more people start leading pug raids. Or we want the buffs to warrior to actually be a buff to the ability for a new player to form a new guild. That's the kind of stuff that makes the community more vibrant, a better place to be. And I think we could do this. Give warriors infinite rage. Infinite. And then start nerfing them from there. If you gave them infinite rage, the quadratic scaling from rage being a resource that allows you to deal damage and generate more of it would be severed. So you fix the biggest issue with warrior balance, the feedback loop. Kill it by giving them infinite rage and nerf them from there. I believe that this would very easily let you buff the lowest end players. It would make things like wild strikes, world buffs, consumes, and enchants far less important because these all basically give rage generation too. This would be fabulous for making low end warriors be able to have more fun in raid. It would make them do more damage, and it would make it so that way including them in a raid would not cause a raid leader to make such a brittle comp. Think about how hard it is to be starting a new guild right now, a new raid group, and maybe you want to have 2 feral druids, that way you can have your warrior friends with you, and if one of the feral calls out that week, you might be unable to complete Sunken Temple because it will hammer your raid group's DPS so much. On my warrior, for example, I haven't had wild strikes in a raid fucking ever, okay? Ever. It's terrible. You do no DPS. You can't hit a lot of buttons. When you hit the wrong button, you're rage starved for 3 seconds. It is so brutal. It is far higher skill to play a warrior without wild strikes Not to say that like you're rewarded for that at all, but it's a lot more skill and you do way less damage. What a terrible recipe for the game to get newer players who are more casual just absolutely ejected from the raiding scene. No, thank you. Maybe instead of normalizing rage, you give everybody infinite, and then you give warriors a passive debuff to their damage, or you half the damage of deep wounds, or you remove recklessness, or you make it so warriors can't receive the buff from the Nomergon chicken. There are so many things like that you could put in, which would allow you to achieve the statistics you want on the top end without really affecting the meta at large. If you are a warrior in a bad group who does low DPS, you don't have recklessness up for a very large percentage of the fight, so it won't harm you nearly as much as it would harm a top tier warrior. And if you're a top tier warrior, you probably don't really care about if you have recklessness anyways, because come on now, you just want to compete with other top tier warriors. You might even enjoy how there's not the lottery anymore on which fight your raid leader decides we're all going to pop wreck on, because that's a way to game really high parses too. In the very first few weeks, you could imagine, hey, if you pick the right boss for everybody to wreck on, maybe none of the other top guilds are doing that one, and you all get free super high parses that will be hard for you to ever achieve again. There's some fun in that, but there's also a lot of pain in that being a thing that exists. I really hope Blizzard doesn't go through with adding normalization because I do think that they will do it in a way that they've done in the past. I don't think they'll get cute with it and try to make it actually good. It'll be a ham-fisted change that obliterates warriors across the board. It will suck, and then they will tell us that they are going to make incremental changes from there, and we know that they will be incredibly slow with them. Right now, the community is still large enough that the servers are healthy, but if you go look at Ironforge Pro statistics, it's not as great as it was in phase one. Some of that's the hype's died down, but I think a lot of it is that as time goes on, the raid comps needed for your group to be successful are getting increasingly more brittle. It is hard to form groups, very, very hard indeed. And although warriors might be great in the best groups, in the worst groups, they are nothing but a liability. So if I was going to pick how the meta would be, I would take Wreck out. I would take the chickens out. I would give everybody infinite rage, and then I would start putting a flat debuff on warriors to get the statistical distribution that I want. And if by chance I was wrong and I saw that by doing this, other classes start getting less representation in raids, I would roll it back so that way those players don't just absorb the problems instead of warriors.